Hi there, and welcome to this summary of the monitoring process I've carried out throughout the month of November, where I've been looking at a dutching technique on the dogs. Specifically, I've been looking for drifters in the dog markets pre-race and then dutching them just before the off with a view to letting them go on to win, ideally. So you'll see the figures at the very top are actually quite disappointing over the course of the month, where we've got into a profit of £254 for a miserly return on investment of 0.85% over the course of nearly 1,200 qualifying races, an effective strike rate of 38%. Now those figures don't really tell the full picture. Let me just jump to the chart of the bank progress throughout the month. And there you see a very frustrating roller coaster that happened throughout the 30 days of November. You can see a lot of noise on the graph, as you would expect from bet to bet and day to day. But the things that you really need to be aware of are the big drawdowns that happened periodically throughout the month. Some of them significant, completely wiping out the gains that had been made prior. So the first one was a drop here of from 850 nearly down to below zero. And then we had another one from nearly £1,200 down to, again, below zero, about minus 170 I think it was, before recovering a little bit. So that peak of 1200 that you see there, about 3/4 of the way along, that occurred last weekend, and no sooner had I achieved that, and I did declare that I was due a drop down, I was expecting one, and no sooner had I typed that in and the drawdown started. On Monday, it affected virtually all the races, slowly crept down to sort of the £500 mark, where it tried to make a bit of a recovery, and then on Friday and Saturday it just fell off a cliff and lost £700, £800. That decline, that plummeting, halted Saturday evening, where it tried to make a bit of recovery, and it's recovered quite happily during the course of today, the very last day. And that's where we've wound up with a profit of 254. So that effectively is the summary of the month's activities. Now if that's all you need to know, fine, but if you're interested at all, just stick with me while I have a look through some of the numbers. Switching back to the actual spreadsheet itself, there was a number of things that were evident fairly early on. After the first week, it was quite clear that races where the effective odds of the Dutch were below 2 weren't performing very well. In fact, they were consistently bad. And so at the end of the first week, I decided to strip all that data out, and what I did was stick it in this spreadsheet here just to preserve it. So you see that involved 272 races, which had lost over £600 within that first week alone. So I removed those from the main sheet and took the opportunity to change the automation so that the odds had to be above 2. And that's the odds for the Dutch, not for individual runners. So in addition to that, or to take that into account going forward, I changed the automation to make sure that the book percentage figure was less than 49%, thus guaranteeing that the effective odds were above 2. In addition to that, there was a few times where there was only one drifter found. I didn't want that. I didn't want my full Dutch stake to be placed on the one runner. So I also changed the changed the automation so that it had to have at least 2 runners involved in the Dutch. So those 2 changes effectively have stripped out virtually 3/4 of the races that took place throughout the 30 days. In addition to that, you'll see that I have some tables down the right hand side. What I've tried to do is summarise those tables based on various headings. So I've looked at course, distance, the race type, even going as far as looking at the time and the weekday, believe it or not, as well as the field size. So I'll look at the course setting itself in a moment, but let's say I'll just scan through some of these tables very quickly. So the first thing is the field size, and you'll see a strange thing in that when there's a full complement of runners, there was a nice tidy profit. In fact, a week ago that was over 1,000. As I say, I've had a particularly bad week. That was over 1,000 a week ago. But consistently, 5 runners has been hovering around the 0 mark for some reason. Don't know. I've also had a look at the weekday, although this table is fairly meaningless, to be honest. This would need to be monitored for at least 6 months before that built up any sort of picture. What I think would probably happen is these numbers would all tend to even out over a longer period of time. You may get some bias towards the Saturday simply because there tends to be more races being held on a Saturday. But generally speaking, I think they would all balance out over time. So that table isn't really telling me very much. The next table, looking at the start time of the races, is curiously telling me something. And that is the morning session. As you can see, I've split these up into hourly segments. So this figure here represents all races from 10 o'clock to 10:59, 11 o'clock to 11:59, and so on. You'll see what I call the morning session, so the first 4 hours up to just before 2 o'clock. That's looking at a loss, if you look at the bottom right hand corner, that's looking at a loss of £1,000 over the month. That session has never been in the black. It's always been heavily in the red. Whereas the other sessions, what I call the afternoon sessions, so that's from 2 to 6, has consistently been in the black, and the evening session has been still better. I also include the hour after 10 o'clock, but that tends to only have 2 or 3 races going on anyway, and it doesn't happen every day. But you'll see there that that's comfortably in the black. So in terms of the time of day, ignoring the morning session and just looking at the afternoon and evening sessions, you've got a lovely return of £1,200. Moving further down, we now sort of split things up in terms of the race type, the category. And here things get a little bit spread out, as you'd expect, because there's lots and lots of categories, so all those races have to be spread out. But there's 2 main areas where most of the races occur, and that's in the A grade, so the A1 down to A12, where you'll see a comfortable profit. Again, at the beginning of this past week, that was up near £1,000. Everything has taken a hit this past week, apart from that time information, which is bizarre. The one thing that has been consistent with regard to the race type is the sprint category, which is designated with a D. It has always been in the red, although D4, for some bizarre reason, has always been comfortably in the black. So that may be an angle that should be taken, i.e. ignore these sprint races. And anyone who's familiar with greyhound racing will understand why. It tends to be a bit of a lottery, because these sprint races tend to be won and lost at the traps If your selection falls out the trap and doesn't get away well, his race is effectively over within a few seconds. So that might be an area that's worth looking at. And then finally, there's the table for the distance. A whole range of distances. Again, all these races are spread more thinly, although there's two main distance areas. There's the sprints from 238 up to 300, and again that's consistently in the red, but that ties in with the D category I just mentioned. Although not all sprints are D categories, you'll get open races and so on at those distances as well. And then we have the 400 to 491 race distance, which has comfortably been in profit throughout the month as well. Again, this is a group of races which have been over £1,000 until last weekend. So that's another area that might be worth looking at, just simply concentrating on those race distances. Now let me just quickly zoom back up to the top where we've got the course summary. Now I've actually organised this table in a particular way because it was evident after the first week that some tracks were performing consistently better than others. So I've ordered this table by return on investment for each track, and what you'll find is these four at the bottom, Doncaster, Sunderland, Sheffield and Hove, have very rarely climbed more than one place higher. They've always been in the bottom five throughout the month. They haven't budged. Similarly at the top end, Kingsley, Nottingham, Yarmouth, Knoxford, they've always been sort of towards the top five. Swindon, in actual fact, until last weekend, was in the top two throughout the month. And then it kind of fell off a cliff on Monday and Tuesday when it lost virtually every race and lost its total profit. It was, a week ago, well into the £400 mark. But I'm flagging this up because clearly if you ignore races at Doncaster, Sunderland, Sheffield and Hove, you could be saving a lot of pennies. And concentrate on some of the ones at the top here where you may well get a decent profit. The trouble with doing any of that is that you start to reduce the size of your data set. Let me just illustrate that. Now I'm on Google Sheets. If you're not familiar with Google Sheets, just bear with me. I'm going to filter the data here. So if I right click and choose create a filter, the first thing we'll do is we'll set up a time filter that we miss out the morning values. So if I filter by condition, choose greater than or equal to and set that to 1400 hours, you'll see right away if you watch this figure here, 254, we immediately get 1259. So our return on investment has suddenly jumped significantly up to 6%. But you'll notice the number of races concerned, which is why our return on investment has jumped up. The number of races concerned is significantly less. Other things that we might want to do, well, we know that the D category is particularly poor. So if I just scroll down here and come out of the D category, even though I've removed D4, which has a particularly good result, there's a D6 here somewhere, there we go. So again, watch the figures at the top of the screen and you'll see our profit has increased again and the return on investment has improved yet again. And then finally, we know that a full complement of runners is also beneficial. So if I just remove all these races here, our profit jumps yet again and our return on investment has increased significantly up to 15%. Now I think we'd all be more than happy with a return on investment of 15% for an automated strategy that takes all of 3 minutes to set up each morning. But the important thing is that the number of races has now fallen to 368 over the full month. And we've now got ourselves to a point where our data set is far too small to draw any conclusions. But whilst I'm here, let's have a look of the effect of that on the bank progress. If I go to this filtered data chart sheet, you'll see we've still got a bit of a drawdown from our peak down here, but we don't have the massive hits that were evident in the full set of data. We've also reduced, as you'd expect, the amount of noise on the graph. And so this is a sort of a trend that I think we'd all like to see. It's interesting, of course, that if I had started this exercise at the beginning of the month when one of those drawdowns was due, and I started on one of those big drawdowns, I would have abandoned it after a few days. So that in itself is worthy of note. It's all too easy to start one of these things and you find yourself on a loser immediately. But that is the reason for doing this for a whole month, because the same argument can apply. You could do something for a couple of days and find yourself getting in a profit, so you jump into the real market with real money and all of a sudden you hit a drawdown. So anyway, that's the data for the filtered amount, but as I was saying, the sample size is far too small now. And therein lies the problem for me. This exercise really needs to be repeated for December and even possibly January. And have these filters that I've just set up here reapplied to those data sets as well, to see if they hold true over the much longer term. The trouble for me is this exercise has tied my PC up full time for 12 hours a day. And so it's restricted other things for me to do. So I'm in two minds whether to halt the thing here or carry on. I'll sleep on it tonight and make a decision tomorrow. But there you have it, guys. That's a summary of what I've been doing in November for this particular strategy. Just to recap, I've been looking for drifters in the greyhound markets pre-race, dutching them just at the scheduled off time, and then letting them go on as straightforward bets. And then monitoring the results and looking for any trends. Hopefully you found that interesting. That's the type of thing that you need to do. If you want to analyse any of your strategies that you want to make, you need to do it over the longer term. There may be strategies that you can use where you can download the data from Betfair. It's in the nature of what I was doing, where I was looking for drifters, so I needed a set time frame before the off to use the selection historical odds in order to establish if something has drifted or not. And I don't think that data is available. It's certainly not available in the free version of the data that you can download. I don't know if Betfair makes that available, and even if it did, I don't have the programming skills to actually make that analysis an efficient task. So I don't really have any option but to set up my computer and let it do its thing. Whether I can afford to let it do its thing 12 hours a day for another month, I have my doubts. Okay guys, I'm going to end it there. Feel free to make any comments down below and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers guys.